Namaste. So we are in the middle of the 13th chapter. So in the 13th chapter, we were talking about the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna, and this body is supposed to be the Kshetra, the field. And I am not the body. I am different from the body. There is an I who recognizes this. So that I, who's different from the body, is called the Kshetrajna. So we are coming to the 26th verse, but before that, Sunilji, you had a question when we wound up last time, and you spoke
Right.
about Tukaram not leaving the ladder. So we said we'll begin next session with that answer.
Correct.
So the ladder you were mentioning is not the body. The ladder is the technique of bhajan, of bhakti. So that he doesn't give up even after self-realization. That's what Vinoba is saying, that he doesn't give up the ladder. He doesn't stop singing bhajans. He's understood the difference between the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna. He's understood the difference between Purush and Prakriti. He's attained the highest realization, but yet he continues to worship the Lord in the form of bhajans.
Yeah, that is right. That is true. See, so मेरी जो विडंबना कह लीजिए वो ये थी कि yes, from a technical point of view, so in this case, of course, it's the bhajans, and in somebody else's case, it may be certain different kind of sadhana. Well, of course, there are hundreds of ways.
Yeah.
The thing is, but it is chiefly the body on the strength of which we ride this course of sadhana.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Yeah.
So yes, just as the method of sadhana becomes irrelevant after achievement, so also the body becomes irrelevant after achievement.
Correct.
Right? Very true.
Yeah.
But like Kabir also says, that just because ज्ञान हो गया तो इसका मतलब थोड़ी कि मैं बुनाई छोड़ दूं.
Yeah, correct.
है ना?
It's the ladder.
It's the ladder. So now, the reason from a pure technical or from a pure transactional standpoint, anything that has lost its utility can obviously be let go of, right? So there is उसमें कोई दिक्कत नहीं है.
Okay.
But अब जैसे भगवान श्री कृष्ण हैं, उनको कुछ भी जगत में कमी नहीं है, परंतु फिर भी वो कर्म करते रहते हैं, बल्कि औरों से ज्यादा कर्म करते हैं. Right? This is in a way to set an example.
Correct. Which is mentioned.
Which is तो अपन ये तो देख ही चुके.
Yeah.
So क्या होता है कि एक तो it kind of sets a bit of a wrong example. कि जब अब हम माने from a again maybe I'm not sure if it is the noblest of approaches, but हम क्या करते हैं कि जब भी साधना बिगिन करते हैं तो हम ऐसा कहते हैं कि भाई पहले तो it delivers health of the body, health of the mind, और वो सच भी है, क्योंकि बेसिक हेल्थ नहीं होगी तो फिर आगे डेवलपमेंट की बात तो एक्चुअली 1 in a million person only can do sadhana even with poor health. तो थोड़ा बहुत मुश्किल हो जाता है. तो फिर वो ऐसा लगता है कि भाई ये ऐसा क्यों, मतलब जो पद्धति है it should settle things in its wake. So having achieved the ultimate, क्यों कई बार बॉडी को कैंसर हो जाता है या ऐसा हो जाता है. Again, this is from public standpoint. You and I perhaps realize and know that इसमें वो जो संचित कर्म है, they have to exhaust themselves. And therefore, what happens is not your or my or the bhakt or the jnani is doing. It's the doing of the agyat. परंतु when जब जो ज्ञानी है या जो रियलाइज बीइंग है वो ऐसा कहते हैं कि बॉडी का तो देखिए ज्यादा कोई महत्व नहीं रहा, तो होता ये है कि the message that may go down to those who are not yet realized may not be the correct one, is the मेरी विडंबना जो है.
Okay. So, as answer to this. He said, see, when you eat a fruit, you throw away the peel, correct? And you eat
Yes.
fruit. So now the fruit has already been obtained. You have got self-realization. So the peel does not matter whether it is there or not there, whether it's in a good condition, it's rotting, not rotting. It doesn't matter. You have no connection with it. As in, you have no interest in it because you've eaten the fruit. So to a normal person also who's going to ask this question, so we have the answer that there is now total separation of the body and the self. So the body
Yes.
is there. So it's there as long as it's there. In whatever condition it's there. We have no connection. I mean, we have no interest, much interest in the body. And we do what is to be done. If it has got cancer, we treat it. We don't go into the why and wherefore of the body because the body as such is perishable. We've already learned this. And now we are going to study all this again now in the 13th chapter. Today, as we go on, these answers will be revealed to us. So shall we begin 13.26, sir?
यावत् सज्जायते किंचित सत्वं स्थावरजंगमं क्षेत्रक्षेत्रज्ञ तद्विद्धि भरतर्षभ.
Yeah. So he says that Arjun, whatever being the moving or unmoving is born, know it as emanated through the union of the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna. That everything we see is a result of these two entities. So they are two separate entities, but at the same time, they're one, which we will learn further on. Shall we read the next one?
समं सर्वेषु भूतेषु तिष्ठन्तं परमेश्वरं विनश्यत्स्वविनश्यन्तं यः पश्यति स पश्यति.
He alone truly sees, who sees the Supreme Lord as imperishable and abiding equally in all perishable beings, both animate and inanimate. So everything which is there in the universe, whether it's moving, not moving, it's alive or dead, living, non-living, is because of that same one principle, the Purusha principle. It's not easy to see this, but the one who sees this, he's a man of wisdom, and he is actually seeing everything. He understands everything. He's a man of wisdom. So we can go on to the next verse, and then slowly after a few verses we'll discuss.
समं पश्यन् हि सर्वत्र समवस्थितमीश्वरं न हिनस्त्यात्मनात्मानं ततो याति पराङ्गतिम्.
So he says, for by seeing the Supreme Lord equally present in all, he does not kill the self by himself and thereby attains the supreme state. So now what does he mean by kill? The one who sees God present in everything, he actually sees. And then when he sees, he's constantly aware of the uh, true self. He's aware of the Purusha, he's aware of the Kshetrajna, he's aware. There is total awareness. So in that awareness, he can't do any wrong. He's always alert, he's always aware. So there is no hinsa, there is no violence, there is no forgetfulness, there is no error, there is just purity in this kind of a state. So in chapter 6 also, we had that we are our best friend and we are our worst enemy. So what does that mean? That when you go on taking from that power of the self, then your mind becomes purer and purer. But when you're away from the self, you kind of become your own enemy. You sink lower into the lower states of mind. But when you take off the power of the self, when you go on being more and more with the self, you become your own friend. So, any questions on this?
Would you explain what is the meaning of killing self? Because You have earlier learned Nainan Chindanti Shastrani.
Yeah, but here now this killing is the translation here, but hinsa can also mean destroying or injuring or being your enemy, kind of a thing. So when you're away from the self, you become your enemy. That means you do wrong actions and you're totally into the material world, even lower in the material world, where there is no sense of right and wrong. So you do not avail of the real self, but you're availing only of the material perishable self, which goes on dying, which goes on changing. So I think that would be the explanation, that you are no longer your friend. You sink lower and lower, and you're not able to lift yourself. You're not able to realize the self in its true form. Mahendra sir, would you elaborate on this? I mean, would you share your thoughts? You're on mute, sir.
Just one line to elaborate.
Huh.
If we keep a constant awareness,
Yeah.
we are in Dharma Kshetra.
Okay.
The moment we are away from that, we
Correct.
come to Kurukshetra. We come to
Okay.
Kurukshetra.
Yeah.
So the first shloka, Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra.
Very
I
true.
think that is explained here also.
Yes, yes. Right.
Constant awareness, Dharma Kshetra. Away from that, Kurukshetra. The
So
difference is here.
true. Very good, sir. Thank you. Yeah. So that is, you become your own enemy. You're in the Kurukshetra, and you become your friend. You're in the Dharmakshetra. You help yourself to lift yourself up, and otherwise you're at war with your own self. So being at war with your own self is nothing but being in a confused state, where you don't know what is right and what is wrong. You don't know what is real and unreal. So that's how you become your enemy. Is that you're killing or injuring your real self? You're clouding it, kind of. So shall we go to the next verse, if this is clear?
प्रकृत्यैव च कर्माणि क्रियमाणानि सर्वशः यः पश्यति तथात्मानम् अकर्तारं स पश्यति.
So he says, he who sees all actions are performed in every way by nature, and the self is a non-doer, he alone verily sees. He sees that everything that is changeful is Prakriti. The Purusha is just a witness. He doesn't do anything. He's just there, standing apart, witnessing and experiencing. So, but you have to really see this difference between the self and the non-self has to be there throughout. It's all mixed up. So that separation is a long process. And he spoke about the virtues. This separation requires knowledge, that constant awareness that this two are two different things. Now that knowledge will come with the practice of virtues, with the imbibing of virtues, which we learned in this chapter. And when one is established in that knowledge, then there is no mixture. Then there is constant awareness. So shall we go on, or do you have any doubts?
Yeah,
We can go on.
Yes. So please, 13.30.
यदा भूत पृथक् भावम् एकस्थम् अनुपश्यति तत एव च विस्तारम् ब्रह्म सम्पद्यते तदा.
So he says, the moment man perceives a diversified existence of beings as rooted in the one supreme spirit and the spreading forth of all beings from the same, that very moment he attains Brahma, whose truth, consciousness and bliss. So you have to constantly remain in that awareness that Prakriti is changeful and that Purusha is the one entity behind everything, which is the life principle or whatever you may call it. When you're totally aware of this difference between the self and the non-self, then you have attained Brahma. You've attained Brahman. Now, this is a matter of experience. I don't know how much we can elaborate on this, but we can just understand that um, you have a kaleidoscope where things are always changing. There are small pieces of glass, and you go on moving it, and different forms are made, and different beings, different designs are created. But that is just the Prakriti part, which is ever moving. The one who makes that move is different from the movement. So this is a matter of realization and experience, not a matter of talking. Because how much ever we discuss about this, we will not be able to understand. But we have to understand that the Prakriti and Purusha are two different things. As we go on reflecting and practicing in our day-to-day life, we'll come to the conclusion, the true conclusion, not an intellectual conclusion. So we'll go on to the next verse. Sir, you're on mute.
आदित्वान् निर्गुणत्वात् परमात्मायम् अव्ययः शरीरस्थोऽपि कौन्तेय न करोति न लिप्यते.
So he says, Arjun, being without beginning and without attributes, this indestructible supreme spirit, though dwelling in the body, does nothing nor gets tainted. So we'll go on to the next verse and then we'll stop there.
यथा सर्वगतं सौक्ष्म्यात् आकाशं नोपलिप्यते सर्वत्रावस्थितो देहे तथात्मा नोपलिप्यते.
As the pervading ether is not contaminated by the reason of its subtlety, though permeating the body, the self is not affected by the attribute of the body due to attributeless character. So now he's giving an example. He's comparing the self with the sky. So however we describe the sky, it's a cloudy sky, it's a blue sky, it's an orange sky, or so many things, clear sky, gloomy sky, so many things, or not gloomy. Everything is actually the sky. There's nothing. The sky is kind of colorless. It is nothing. We give it attributes. But the sky is separate from everything that moves onto it. So in the same way, the self is distinct from Prakriti. And it is not affected in any way by Prakriti, by the changes in Prakriti. All right. So, so you want to say anything?
Continuous aware of the self and the supreme self. Gross example would be taken of an ocean. An ocean has no beginning, no end. But remember, it has waves. And waves have beginning and waves have end. So spirit is like the waves. And the supreme spirit is like the ocean itself, although no difference. So realizing always that this individual spirit is only a part of that, keeping always in mind, we proceed in life. I think that's what is said in these shlokas.
Yeah.
Realization of the spirit with the supreme spirit, self with the supreme self. One doesn't have beginning and the end, the other has the beginning and the end, still they are same.
Yeah, still they are same. See, it has a beginning. Prakriti is also eternal because it's just changing the form. It's not going away anywhere. It is eternal. So like when the human being or when a body dies, it goes back to the dust. It goes back to the elements, which are imperishable. So in that way, it's
Both
change.
are imperishable.
Yeah, both are imperishable, but the form is changing.
Yes.
You become a form. You may become a tree, you may become a human being, an animal, a stone. So even if a stone is disintegrates, it goes back into the element of earth.
Yes.
Because Prakriti is from Purusha, it is eternal, but it's changing the form, and we get enamored or we get attached to the forms. So in that way, we see it as beginning and an end.
Yes.
We shall go on to the next verse.
यथा प्रकाशयत्येकः कृत्स्नं लोकम् इमं रविः क्षेत्रं क्षेत्री तथा कृत्स्नं प्रकाशयति भारत.
He says, Arjun, as the one sun illumines this entire universe, so also that one Atma illumines the whole Kshetra, the whole field. That one Atma is there in this whole universe, illuminating everything which is there. Like the sun illuminates everything, not one thing, but everything which is in contact with it. So the Atma also illuminates everything.
And like what is said in verse 32, the sun is not affected by what it illuminates.
Correct. Yeah.
So this is a different metaphor than what Mahendraji was saying about the waves and the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in the waves and ocean metaphor, there is Advaita, non-duality. But here there is a duality because the sun is not affected by what it illuminates.
Correct. Yeah, so these are basically matters of discussion where we try and make mind clearer through different examples and similes and metaphors. But finally, one has to experience because there is no description of the self. You cannot describe the self because your intellect is limited to describe it. So yes, with the help of different examples, so he's giving different examples of the sky. Now he's giving the different example of the sun. And he's basically saying that is separate.
Yeah.
So now
So
the
verse 32 and 33 state the Sankhya position very clearly.
Yeah, the one. So we'll do the concluding last verse of this chapter, and then we do the Shvika.
क्षेत्र क्षेत्रज्ञयोर एवं अंतरं ज्ञान चक्षुषा भूत प्रकृति मोक्षंच ये विदुर यान्ति ते परम.
Says those who perceive with the eye of wisdom the difference between Kshetra and the Kshetrajna, and the phenomenon of liberation from Prakriti with her evolutes reach the supreme eternal spirit. So those who perceive the difference perceive it all the time, eternally, that knowledge is ever alive in the mind, in oneself. When you understand this, when you see the difference, you reach the supreme eternal spirit. When you truly and wholly know that this is different and you don't get mixed up, then you reach the supreme spirit. You're liberated from Prakriti. You understand Prakriti fully and you experience Purusha. You become with Purusha. Understanding Purusha is becoming one with it. Anyway, we can end this
So the
chapter, and the
Kshetra,
14th chapter will be. Sorry,
Kshetra and Kshetragya becomes one.
what will become one?
Kshetra and Kshetragya.
Yeah, so that you become the Purusha from where the Kshetra comes out.
Yes.
You attain the nature of Purusha.
Roughly become one.
You become one. You become one.
Yes. So the knowledge, the knower, and the known, they all merge in that state.
Correct. Correct.
And that's the liberation, what it says.
That's the liberation. Yeah. True. So, Neil, do you have to say something? You're thinking.
Serious topic.
आप म्यूट पे हैं.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
I'm saying you change your loyalty from Prakriti. You can't become loyal to the Purusha.
It's very true. The same word is going to come in 14th chapter, and the same thing was there in the virtues in the 13th chapter. I think it was 13.11. I'm just turning to the shloka. Yeah, sorry, it is 13.10, where he says, Avyabhicharini bhakti. Avyabhicharini bhakti, and the same bhakti, Avyabhicharini bhakti, is used in 14th chapter. So where you have shifted your loyalties from Prakriti to Purusha. The bhakti which is there, which is unwavering, constant, it is towards Purusha and not towards Prakriti. And the same thing is going to come in 14th chapter. The 14th chapter is more, again, he's starting with the 14th chapter where he says, I'm again going to repeat this. So he's giving you a strategy. See, in the 13th chapter, he's just giving you knowledge. Okay, so now we have to read through this and understand. But 14th chapter is more practical, where you can apply and you can actually conquer the self. He's telling you the strategy to do it. So, we'll read up the last verse of 13th chapter. Om Tat Saditi.
Om Tat Saditi Srimad Bhagavad Gitasu Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishnarjuna Samvade Kshetra Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yogo Nama Trayodasho Adhyayah. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Atha Chaturdashodhyayah. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. Param Bhuya Pravakshyami Jnananan Jnanamuttamam Yajñatva Munaya Sarve Param Siddhim Ito Gataha.
Yeah. So he says now, Bhuya, again I'm going to tell you. He says, Bhagavan is saying that I shall expound once more the supreme knowledge. Now, this is the best of knowledges, and acquiring which all sages have attained highest perfection and being liberated from this mundane existence. So he's saying, again, I'm going to tell you. So we'll read the next verse. So you're on mute.
Idam Jnanam Upashritya Mama Sadharmyam Agataha Sarge Pinopajayante Pralaye Na Vyathanti Cha.
So he says, those who by this knowledge have entered my being are not born again at the cosmic dawn, nor feel disturbed even during the cosmic dissolution. So he says, Sadharmya agataha, Sadharma. I become, those who get this knowledge, they become me. What we saw in the 13th chapter also. They become of my nature, Sadharmya agataha. They become by nature, though this is the highest knowledge. We think I'm going to tell this again, and this is the Uttam knowledge. And once you take partake of this knowledge, you practice this knowledge. You take Upashritya. He's saying that when you resort to this knowledge, you become myself, you become my being, you become of my nature. So you have to practice this knowledge. You have to take refuge in this knowledge. And what is this knowledge? He gave us those virtues. And now he's again going to tell us about this. So once you start practicing this, you become my being. He's saying take refuge in this knowledge. Then it will never be clouded. You're born, you're dead. Things around you are born, dead. The universe collapses, the universe regenerates. You will remain aware all the time, eternally. But partake of this knowledge. Take refuge in this knowledge. Now, what is that knowledge? He's going to again tell us, because we need to be repeatedly told this knowledge. We've heard so many chapters, 13th chapter. But again, he's going to tell us the knowledge. Probably like Arjun, we also have not understood. So he's going again with this knowledge. So 14.3, sir.
मम योनिर महत् ब्रह्म तस्मिन् गर्भं दधाम्यहम् संभवः सर्वभूतानां ततो भवति भारत.
So he says, my primordial nature, known as the great Brahma, the Mahat, is the womb of all creatures. In that womb, I place the seed of life. The creation of all beings follows from that matter, union of matter and spirit. So now in the Sankhya, we've understood, we've read that the first evolute of Purusha is first evolute of Prakriti. The first thing is Mahat. So he says that Mahat is my womb. In that I only place the seed. Everything is mine. Prakriti is also mine. And from there, all the beings arise. So we've already been told this. We've studied this. And whether we've understood it or not is a different thing. But everything is him. He is the womb, and he only places the seed in the womb. So we'll read the next verse.
सर्व योनिषु कौन्तेय मूर्तयः सम्भवन्ति याः तासां ब्रह्म महद् योनिर् अहं बीजप्रदः पिता.
Okay, so he says that of all embodied beings that appear in all the species of various kinds, Arjun, Prakriti or nature is the conceiving mother, and I am the seed-giving father. So he is the womb, he's the one who puts the seed, he's the father. So very often we have this question, is God mother or father? Why is God called he? So here he says, I am the seed-giving father, because in the normal existence, we will understand it because the father is the one who gives the seed. So he is the one from which everything comes. He puts the seed, and then from Prakriti, the different forms and different things come. So whatever forms are produced in all the wombs, he is the father. And the different forms are seen because of the difference in Prakriti, the diversified Prakriti. The Avyakt Prakriti, the undiversified Prakriti, starts diversifying now. There is a combination of the Mahat, the Buddhi, Ahankar, the elements. They start diversifying and they become the senses, the mind, and the objects of senses. And then the whole creation starts. Able to see that one, we forget that one seed-giving father, that one, and we get lost in the diversification. So he's reminding again that I am the seed-giving father. From me, everything comes. And then now he's told about himself. Now in the next verse, he's going to tell us about Prakriti. why this happens. So we'll read the next verse.
सत्वं रजस्तम इति गुणाः प्रकृति संभवाः निबध्नन्ति महाबाहो देहे देहिनम् अव्ययम्.
So now he's telling us that I am the father. Now listen about Prakriti. Prakriti is made up of Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. And these are born, these are called gunas, and these are born from nature. And they tie down the soul to the body. So he's kind of classifying Prakriti. And then he's giving us the knowledge about all these three gunas in this chapter. And then he's going to tell us how to, once we know the knowledge, we know about the three gunas, once we have the knowledge, then it will be easy to overpower the gunas. It's like Vinoba says that in a war, you have to understand the enemy. You have to know the enemy. And then you strategize and conquer the enemy. So I understand what is the nature of the enemy. How is it that I can conquer the enemy? So these are the three, and they tie down the body to this material world. The soul is actually free. But these three gunas, they bind the body to this material world. So if we have to reach the self, we have to break free from these three gunas. So before we break free from gunas, we have to understand the gunas. So these gunas, this word guna is also one of the translation would be strings or threads. So in that way, they bind the body to the material world.
Ashaji, the translation here says that the gunas tie down the imperishable soul to the body.
Now the soul can't be tied.
That's what the translation says.
Yeah, they tie the body to the, see, the soul is, the body is living because of the soul. It's not just a body, it's a living body. Correct? So in that sense, it is the soul. This body is alive, this soul is there, but it is not able to identify with the soul or understand the soul because it's totally wrapped up with the physical part. That's why we attribute it. So, shall we go to the next verse, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tatra sattvam nirmalatvat prakashakam anamayam sukha sangena badnati jnana sangena chanagha.
So he says these sattva being immaculate is illuminating and flawless. Arjun, it binds through attachment to happiness and knowledge. So he's now describing the three gunas, and he says this sattva, it's going to bind you to this material world through, first he says it is pure, and it is going to bind you through happiness, sukha sangena and jnana sangena. Through happiness and knowledge, it is going to bind you to this material world. And you will still not be able to understand the soul, the self. And he says it is nirmal, it is without any mal, it is pure, and it is illuminating, it is full of well-being, it is healthy, and it's going to give you a very peaceful kind of a quality, and it's going to give you happiness, it's going to give you a lot of knowledge, and in that happiness you will be attached to this material world. And you will still not be able to get free from this material world because you will be attached. You will not be able to realize the self. So shall we discuss this? How does it bind? Why is knowledge also called binding? Jnana sangena. So knowledge is also binding. What are our answers for this? Everybody is on mute. Sunilji, you're on mute.
Right. Huh? Knowledge, I presume here refers to not jnana, but information or the working. So I think it binds by tying itself down to the domain of the intellect,
Correct.
which is a part
Yeah,
of the
it's in.
Prakriti.
Yeah. So it's knowledge. It's knowledge which is making me separate from the self. When I go beyond that and I become that thing, then I attain freedom. Okay, Ashutosh, would you like to say anything?
Start saying that I know, then that I becomes more important than the no.
Correct.
No part.
Yes. Yes.
So it can become an addiction.
Yes. True. Very true. And I feel happiness in that I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Very,
what he says. Sukha sangena badnati jnana sangena chanaka. So it's binding. So even this sattva is an enemy. This pure sattva has to be transcended. Knowledge is also limiting. That final thing is just the experience, where there is no talking, nothing. There is just that experience, where you're beyond that knowledge. So, yeah. So now we can go on to the next verse. Understand these three gunas. Uh, 14.7. Rajo ragatmakam.
Rajo ragatmakam vidhi. Krishna sangam samudbhavam. Tannibadhnati kaunteya. Karma sangena dehinam.
So he says, no quality of rajas, which is of the nature of passion, is born of desire and attachment. It binds the soul through attachment to actions and their fruit. So now, there he used sukha and jnana, and here we are bound by attachment to action. So should we not act? What should we do? Should we act or not? Is every action guiding us? Then how do we get ourselves free? Should we stop acting? So what would be the answer of this? It's attaching us by action. We have to act. Then how can we be free from rajas? He's saying that karma is going to bind you. And how can karma liberate? Why is this chapter, why is this whole text, why is this whole scripture called called Karma Yoga? Why is this whole scripture based on Karma Yoga? How can that karma free us? How can karma lead us to liberation? If over here that karma is attaching you, then be free from. So this chapter is very doable. You can practice it. So he's giving the answer over here only. Rajas is the nature of passion. It is born of desire and attachment. And it binds the soul through attachment to acts and their fruits. So basically what he's saying that it is binding you through desire. So the action has to be free of desire. How can the action be free of desire? When the action is your duty. When you start following Swadharma, then there is no desire. You simply do what you're supposed to do. You cannot follow Swadharma if there is desire. He says, go on doing your duty. When you do the right action, then action does not bind you. It starts freeing you. So for that, you need sattva. You need to be you need to be clear in your mind that clarity has to be there all the time. And I should not get attached to that knowledge. I should not get attached to this. I should not say, okay, I like this. I'm happy in this. Like Arjun wants, when Arjun is going to fight a war, he's going to kill the good and the bad. With the bad, he's going to kill the good. He's going to kill Bhishma. He's going to kill Drona, who apparently are good for him. But he's told that you simply do your duty. There is no like over here. There is no happiness. He's going to be unhappy if he's going to kill his uncle and his teacher. But he's told that you do your duty. Get about that desire. Start doing your duty. When you do the right actions, it will free you. But if you do action which is based on desire, which is based on likes and dislikes, which is based on happiness and unhappiness, then that action will bind you. So he says that Rajas is of the nature of passion. It's born of desire and attachment. It binds the soul through attachment to actions. So don't do actions under the garb of attachment. Do them because you're supposed to do it. Because it is your adhikar, it is your right to do the action. Just do it. Don't think of the result. So that is the way to conquer Rajas. And then he goes to the tamas.
Tamastvajnanajam vidhi mohanam sarvadehinam pramadalasya nidrabhis tan nibadhnati bharata.
So he says this tamas is the deluder of those who look upon the body as their self, as born of ignorance. It binds the soul through error, sloth, and sleep. So these are the three attributes of tamas. And whenever, see, we are told all this so that we can recognize these qualities as that once we have the moment we feel very happy in doing a thing, we have to understand whether it's our duty or not our duty, whether it is born of desire or not. And then the moment we feel that we are lazy and the mind is getting clouded and we are becoming inactive, lethargic, we have to understand that this is tamas and we have to fight this tamas. So how do we fight this error, sloth, and sleep? So Vinoba first talks about sloth. He says alasya. Alasya, laziness. He says first, you have to shake off this laziness. Get up and start going into the Rajasic state. Start working. But don't work heedlessly. Think, is it your duty? It's the sattva. And then he says, first, get up and do the action. And when you do the action, you will be able to conquer sleep. And once that sleepiness is gone from your mind, then you will not make errors. So do action, but do the right action. Okay. Shall we read the next verse?
Yeah. Sattvam sukhe sanjayati rajah karmani bharata jnanam avrutya tu tama pramade sanjayat pita.
That sattva draws one to joy and rajas to action. Tamas, clouding wisdom, impels one to error, sleep, and sloth. Arjun. Again, he says the same thing that draws one to joy. But is that valid? And rajas to action. Should that action be done? And tamas clouds both. There is always error in tamas. Again, he's repeating the three things. Pramade, actually he's saying pramad. It clouds the intellect, it clouds knowledge, it clouds sattva in other words, and it leads to error. So basically now we have to understand that these three gunas, we have to understand their nature, and we have to be aware of it, and we have to conquer. So he's told us about the enemy. And now in the next verse, so would you read the next verse?
रजस्तमश्चाभिभूय सत्वं भवति भारत रजसत्वं तमश्चैव तमसत्वं रजस्तथा.
So he says that these three are ever overpowering Rajas and Tamas, Arjun. Sattva prevails. Overpowering Sattva and Tamas, Rajas prevails. And so, even so, overpowering Sattva and Rajas, Tamas prevails. Yes, these three are always at work. Always. Sometimes Sattva is there. Sometimes Rajas is there ascending. Sometimes Tamas is there. They are always there, always moving, always overpowering each other, subduing each other, always at war with each other, and clouding the mind. So all three have to be put to rest. As long as we have this body, they all three are going to be at play. We always call it the play of the gunas. They are always there playing, subduing each other, overpowering each other. So in the next verse,
Yeah.
Yeah.
listen.
Yes.
The third one is little dicey.
Okay.
See, overpowering Rajas and Tamas, Sattva prevails, fine. Overpowering Sattva and Tamas, Rajas prevails. How come overpowering Sattva and Rajas, Tamas prevails? This is something.
So first, overpowering Rajas and Tamas, Sattva prevails. Okay, that is understandable.
Yes, yes.
Now, Sattva and Tamas, Rajas. Rajas is desire.
That is
Rajas,
also
correct? Yeah. Then Tamas
yes.
is like, you see, when this desire is, Rajas is desire. Tamas is like you don't even do the right action. You want to do something right, but Tamas is kind of clouding you. See, Arjun is in that confused state, which is a tamasic state. He knows that he has to fight the war. He knows that it is a righteous war. The Bhagavad Gita begins with the word Dharma Kshetra. That it is Dharma. The war is Dharma. Before the war, he is all good. He's all clear. He's all prepared for the war. And during the war, he is clouded by attachment. That attachment makes him kind of incapable. It clouds his mind, and he's not able to do any action. It makes him incapable of action. He says, I want to leave the war and go away. So what would we call that condition? So if I have to do something, but I'm overpowered by that laziness can cloud my mind to such an extent that it removes all clarity about what is to be done and what is not to be done. So is that a little clear?
Yeah, sometimes the task is difficult. So I try, but I don't succeed. Then I get tired. Then I say, okay, let me give it up.
Yeah.
And then I stop my effort.
Correct.
So
Correct.
in that case, Tamas has overcome Rajas. In the same way, something is very difficult to understand.
Yeah.
I make an effort, but I don't understand. It is still difficult.
Yeah.
Then I give up studying.
Correct.
And I go to sleep.
Yes. Yes, yes. So very right. So when you start doing actions which are born of desire, when you act too much, when you go on acting passionately, there comes a point where you're tired. That tiredness of mind also happens because you don't see the result. See, tamas is something, rajas and tamas is something which wants results. Passion, the desire is because I want a result. When you start putting your mind on the result, this rajas and tamas is going to overpower you. When you want a result, you work very hard. And then when you don't get the result, you give it up. Like, sir, you rightly pointed out, you simply give it up. I can't do it. I can't achieve the result, so I give it up.
No, but here the word used is overpowering.
Yeah,
Is it
so
giving up or the overpowering? Is it control, taking charge of, or giving up? It is overpowering. Overpowering means you take the charge of that,
yeah,
not the giving up.
correct. So laziness has taken charge of our mind, right? Laziness or error or mistake has taken charge of our mind, and we are not able to see the right and the wrong. Like Duryodhan has taken it for granted that he's right and that he is the heir to the kingdom, and he's not able to see the right side of the picture, the correct side. So he's overpowered by tamas, and so he gives up the right action, and there is no clarity in him. So is that clear?
Still in doubt.
Okay.
Overpowering
Overpower.
sattva. Yeah, Sunil, you want to say something?
No, I was trying to say that overpowering means sattva is not
maybe
in the
here,
position.
sir, this is the way.
So the word is
Is
Abhi
even more
Bhuya.
for me actually.
Sunilji, your voice is
Yes,
breaking.
Breaking, yes.
Somehow the internet connection is not so good.
Now it's okay.
Is it still breaking? One sec, hold on. I will try
No,
with
it's
the.
okay. It's okay.
Is it okay?
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Okay. You know, the difficulty is actually even more for me because now as I'm linking back to Sankhya, having now, you know,
Now the ball is in
myself
your
to
court.
teach. Sorry?
The ball is in your court now.
Yes, that is right. So what I'm saying is, from a what shall we say, from a cosmic standpoint, the three gunas are, merely the three phases of a vibratory cycle. Like any, like a tuning fork. When we kind of tuning fork, it vibrates. So there are three phases to that cycle. There is a phase where the two ends of the tuning fork are moving away from each other. That is the expansive phase. Then there is a phase where there is a reversal in direction. And, having reached the maximum, it's now starting to come back. And then there's a phase when the ends are approaching each other towards the starting position. So the three gunas are really, the expansive is the sattva, the change of phase is raja, and the coming together is tama. Right? So it's I'm not yet able to juxtapose this and that. So I could only say that maybe we have to accept the text saying that, look, this is the factual position. We simply have to accept it and go on.
See, there can be one more explanation of this. Tamas is basically a submission to whatever is happening around you. Submission in a different way. It can be mistaken as sattva. So when I use the word submission, it is total submission. Jo ho raha hai, theek hai. That means I'm not putting in any effort to do the right thing, to get out of my inertia state. It is a total state of inertia which has overpowered sattva and rajas, where I'm not even being able to be active. I think I can only give this example of Arjun, where he says he gets into that state of inertia, where he says, I don't want to do the right thing. I don't want to fight the war. So he's kind of overpowered by that inertia state, where it's total, where you see a beggar lying on the road. A beggar is still begging, but there are beggars who are just on the road. They are under the influence of drugs. They are just lying on the floor, not moving, absolutely just drop dead alive, but as if dead on the pavement. That is that tamas, where there is no movement. It's kind of a dark state where there is no activity and there is no clarity. So even Raja Dashrath, when he's told that Ram has to go to the forest, so he just collapses and he dies. So you're totally overpowered by that mental state where you can't think.
I mean, I have seen and we have also read about a lot of educated people also getting addicted to drugs.
Yeah.
They know the ill effects of drugs. They know everything, but they are not able to do anything about it. So in that case, and they remain addicted, then they have to go into rehabilitation centers. And we have heard of so many actors and celebrities going into rehabilitation centers. So that is an example of how tamas has overpowered sattva and rajas.
There is no
Even in Mahabharata, Dharmaraj is overpowered by tamas in that Dyuta thing.
correct.
When they are playing dice with Kauravas.
Yes, Mahendra sir, will get clearer as we read on.
Much clearer.
Yes.
Loosely speaking, excess of everything is bad. What is in a much simple way. Excess, the sattva and rajas and rajmas, and just gone beyond.
Yeah.
And you gave the example of Raja Dashath, very apt to that situation.
Correct.
So if that becomes the state, you automatically acquire the third state, is tamas.
Yes.
I think that's how.
Yeah.
It's a clearer. Yeah.
Okay. So we go on to the next verse, sir, verse 11.
Yes.
सर्वद्वारेषु देहेऽस्मिन् प्रकाश उपजायते ज्ञानं यदा तदा विद्यात् विवृद्धं सत्वम् इत्युत.
Yeah, so it says that when light and discernment dawn in this body, as well as in the mind and senses, then one should know that sattva is predominant. I'm just going back to the example of the Ramayana, where Ram is also told that he has to go to the forest, but he is calm. There is not a flicker on his face. That is how the verse is described in the Ramayana. There is not a flicker on his face, and he just accepts and he goes away. So when you are totally, the knowledge is present, there is light, there's discernment, where there is rational thinking. There is, this is right, this is wrong. When you are in that rational state of mind, then you have to understand that sattva is. Sometimes people are abused. But if a man is in his rational state, then he does not react. But a person who's lost his rational state can get violent and react. Or a person who's in that tamasic state, like let me give you the example of Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, and another of his disciples. So Swami Vivekananda and one disciple whose name I'm not sure of, they are in the boat and they are going from one end to the other. And in the boat, some of the people over there sing Sri Ramakrishna. And that this guru is a mad guru. So Swami Vivekananda gets very annoyed and he abuses and shouts. And that other disciple just keeps quiet. Then when they go reach the ashram, and then Swami Vivek, and then Sri Ramakrishna hears this piece, this situation, and Swami Vivekananda says, he was abusing you and I abused him back. So Sri Ramakrishna said, you should not have done that. People can just talk anything. Why did you have to react? You must keep quiet. And that other disciple says, I never said anything. So Sri Ramakrishna says, somebody is abusing your guru and you're just keeping silent. You should have spoken something. So this kind of balance to know what to do when this light and discernment is there, that I should do this. So understanding this kind of knowledge, when it is clear in your mind and body and the senses, then understand that sattva is predominant. When is it that I should open my mouth and when is it that I should close? I had also shared this that once during the class, Dr. Saab had told one of us that you have spoken when you should not have spoken and you have kept quiet when you should have spoken. तो कब बोलना है, कब नहीं बोलना है, क्या काम करना है, क्या नहीं करना है, that kind of a discriminating or rational thinking, if it is there in your mind all the time, then you sattva is there. So we read the next verse.
लोभ प्रवृत्तिरारंभ कर्मणाम अशम स्पृहा रजस्येतानि जायन्ते विवृद्धे भरतर्षभ.
With preponderance of Arjun, greed, activity, undertaking of action with an interested motive, restlessness, and a thirst for enjoyment make their appearance. So, restlessness. I want to do this. I want to do that. If it is to be done, you will do it calmly. That calmness goes away. मुझे ये भी करना है, मुझे वो भी करना है, मुझे बहुत सारी चीजें करनी है. That kind of desire is there. Because I want this, I want that, so I must do this and I must do that. So rajas is activity which is not based on dharma, which is based on desire. So there is greed, there is always that thought about the result, and action is undertaken with an interested motive, that there is a thought of result, that I want this, that's why I want to do this. So there's interference. I want this. Now again, we have to think about all these things. We are not against action, but we are not for wrong action. We have to do the right action, which is our dharma, which is our duty. So the whole of the Bhagavad Gita is talking about swadharma. In this, like karma yoga means swadharma. Karma yoga doesn't mean doing every action. Karma yoga does not mean too much of action. Karma yoga means doing the right action. Even a sannyasi is a karma yogi. He doesn't do anything, but he is a karma yogi. In chapter 5, he says there is no difference between the sannyasi and the karma yogi. So you cannot equate a karma yogi as the one who's doing too much of action, but doing the right action. Like Raja Janak is a karma yogi. He's doing the right action. He's doing his swadharma. So when you do the right kind of action, it liberates you. Shall we go to the next verse?
Yes.
अप्रकाशो प्रवृत्तिश्च प्रमादो मोह एव च तमस्येतानि जायन्ते विवृद्धे कुरु नन्दन.
With the growth of tamas, Arjun, obtuseness of the mind and senses, disinclination to perform one's obligatory duties, frivolities, stupor, all these appear. So now tamas is described, and it says that there is aprakash, there is darkness. there is apravritti, there is dullness, there is inactivity. I can't get up and do anything. I'm in that state where I just cannot, I'm inert, like a state of inertia. There is pramad, there is negligence, there is misunderstanding or miscomprehension, and there is moha. I'm totally attached. I take this world to be real. I take things around me to be real, and I'm totally attached. When this comes into being, then you can be assured that you are in a tamasic state. Okay. So we have 3 minutes. Anybody wants to say anything? See, this moha, this attachment can overpower anybody. It's very, very difficult to be separate from the body, to be separate from relationships, to be separate from the objects we possess. It's very difficult. One of the virtues in chapter 13 says that there is no attachment to putra, dar, and gruha, to the son, to the house, the wife, all relationships. There is no attachment. There is no identification, he says. So it's very, very difficult not to be under the influence of moha. Arjun is under the influence of moha at the beginning of the war. Duryodhana is under the influence of moha. Dhritarashtra is also under the influence of moha. So it needs a lot of rational thinking. It needs a lot of sattva, and it needs a lot of work. And all these gunas can come only when there is self-restraint. When you go on discriminating and controlling.
But the way tamas is usually shown is that tamas is undesirable. But tamas also has a place.
Yes, tamas also has a place. True. Because sleep is not tamas, but sleep as in with a state of awareness